Okay, so what I want to do in this video is I want to come back and look at this idea of the Garden of Eden. Of Eden as being two trees, right? The Garden of Eden tells us something about God and man, and the idea that there's two trees in the garden, right? The tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We've seen this in previous videos. And I want us to see this Garden of Eden. Is the right perspective on this? Should we be looking at it as something physical or relational? Hopefully by now what we're starting to see is that the emphasis here is on the relational. And the idea of there being two trees in the garden is emphasizing something that's relational. There is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's the tree of the knowledge of life, or tree of life. So let's just call this life. There's also the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Evil and good. Both of those trees are under the relational construct. I think what I want to point out here is that I think the emphasis, the point of interest is not that the garden is a physical place. I do believe the Garden of Eden is a physical place. But if it's a physical place, then we have to go there. And if we can't go there, then we can't experience anything of the Garden of Eden. But if it's a relational construct, if it's meant to be viewed through a relational lens as opposed to a physical lens, then we could see not only how it impacts Adam and Eve, but how does it impact our lives? Is it possible that there's a Garden of Eden in each and every one of us, where God's making an offer to us to live relationally out of life or out of the knowledge of good and evil? And God said to Adam and Eve, when you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, first of all, he said you're free, right? I'm reviewing. You're free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. So let's show death as separation. Why? Because this is what life looks like. Life is union. It's a relational construct. It's union. Man and God are bound together as one. That's what life is. That's what life looks like. So when God said you will surely die, he didn't mean you're going to go into the grave, you're going to go into a coffin. He meant that relationally you're going to be disconnected, you're going to be separated, where before you had union and before you had life, now you're going to have death in the sense that you're going to have separation. These are relational constructs, relational terms. Very important. In this relationship of life, which first of all, it's what God made us for. This is what we are hardwired for. We are hardwired for life. No matter how much knowledge we have, whether it's evil or good, no matter how much knowledge we have, knowledge can never become life. Life is union. Knowledge is death. Knowledge is separation. And moving from this side of the wrong tree to that side of the wrong tree is not the same thing as having life and living out of life. Now, in this construct, the Bible uses an interesting phrase. It just talks about God and man, and it says that man was, one, naked, and two, not ashamed. Let's put not shamed. Or let's make it no shame. Get my handy dandy eraser here and call this no shame. See if I can still make that an O. Yeah, no shame. In this relationship of life that God has with man, right? God doesn't force this on man, but he says this is how it's intended and this is how it existed prior to the fall. Man is naked and no shame. Naked means lacking. Maybe it's physically lacking. I'm lacking clothes. I'm without clothes. I'm naked and there's no shame. Man is in a relationship with God. It's okay for man to be man and for man to be man. It's okay to be naked, means lacking, and there's no shame in that nakedness. A perfect picture of this is children. Little children, right? Little children come into the world. How are they? They are naked in the sense that they're lacking, and there's no shame in their nakedness. They have to have their diaper changed. They're dependent upon their parents for everything, for food, for clothing, for shelter, you name it, and there's no shame in that dependence. So being totally dependent upon their parents, they're not shamed. They're not shamed when they come to us and ask us to change their clothes or change their diaper, right? There's no shame in that. Why? Because they're living out of life, if I could say it that way. They're experiencing and living out of life. A picture of this is found in little children. So what happens is, in the fall, when man makes the decision, God doesn't force this upon him, even though this is what we're created for, right? In the fall, we move to the knowledge of good and evil. We're separated, and this relationship dynamic down here gets messed up. Because all of a sudden, man is, one, still naked. Man, we are naked, whether we realize it or not. We are lacking. Okay, that doesn't change. What changes is we don't embrace our nakedness. All of a sudden now, shame comes into the picture. We move from being in no shame, you heard of no fault insurance, this is no shame nakedness, to shamed nakedness. All of a sudden, we buy into the lie that we're supposed to be like God. And that with that lie comes shame. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with us. And we buy into that lie. We believe that lie. And all of a sudden, shame comes into the picture. Shame enters in. And we try to cover up that shame and mask that shame. And we move from a place of being absolutely dependent in a relationship of union to God, union with God. We move now into a relationship of independence, separation, where we are separated from God. And we buy into this lie that now we're supposed to be God. We're still naked in the sense that we're lacking. We don't even believe that. But if we do find ourselves lacking, or where we find ourselves lacking, suddenly shame enters into the picture. It's this lie that undergirds all the problems that we face. We believe now that we're supposed to be like God. That comes out of our separation. In this relationship of union, the way it was intended to be, we're very happy and content to embrace that we are naked and unashamed because God's got our back. We're not alone. We're together with Him. And in that relationship of togetherness with Him, He has our back. We're lacking, and there's no shame in that. We're like little children. Interesting, when Jesus comes, they ask Him the question, the disciples ask Him the question, who's the greatest in the kingdom of God? And how does He answer that question? He says, go get a little child, and I will show you what greatness in the kingdom of God looks like. Isn't that interesting that He goes back to that model, that construct of a child? He says, unless you humble yourself and become like little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. So one of the things we're going to see is that as we push forward again and we keep looking into Jesus as the model of what it means to be human, right? Jesus, humanity 2.0. As we start to study and think about Jesus as the model, the archetype of what it means to be human, we're going to see Him returning to that model right there of being in a relationship with God. Believe it or not, this describes the underlying dynamics of Jesus in His relationship with God. Why? Because He is human, fully human. Great stuff. Very significant stuff. See you in the next video.